Defeated, downcast, without another chance and with the conviction that is the end. This is the character shown before our eyes. We are in 1815, a year that marks the end of a glorious era for France that revolves around this dejected man who was able to build an empire as ever known since Roman times. Napoleon Bonaparte was portrayed in 1845 by a romantic painter, Paul Delaroche, who managed masterfully to show the strong character of a man at the end of his political career and in absolute decline of his glory. But who was Napoleon? Napoleon was born in Ajaccio, Corsica, in 1769, in a wealthy middle-class family. He began his military studies in France, soon distinguished by his leadership, his learning ability and courage. It was the defense of the revolutionary process of both internal and external threats which led him to become a general when he was 24 years old. He managed to stop the dangerous counter-revolution in the region of La Vendée. Being a general, he beat the Austrians and signed Campo Formio peace, conquered for France and territories of Venice, Genoa and Lombardy. But it was with the campaign in Egypt against Britain when he became an acclaimed figure in France. Napoleon then represented the prestige of the army against the discouragement and lack of credibility of the political class of that time. Napoleon took advantage of his fame and weakness of the board to give a coup on November 18, 1799. The consulate was proclaimed. It consisted of 3 consuls. One of them was Napoleon. At the end, he brought all the power for himself, and despite introducing universal suffrage, Napoleon converted the consulate in a disguised dictatorship. Napoleon held many internal reforms, such as restoring law and order through the creation of the Ministry of Interior and a secret police. He carried out a centralized administration, a tax reform. All citizens had to pay taxes, a public education law, and created a civil code guaranteeing individual liberty, equality before the law, private property and economic freedom. With these reforms, Napoleon kept many of the principles in the revolution, but in turn he distorted the idea of universal suffrage, used education as a moral instrument, the courts were purged and press freedom was restricted. However, Napoleon was mainly known by his foreign policy, whose aim was to spread revolutionary ideas to the rest of the continent and demolish the structures of the ancient regime. It made France the country of reference in Europe and centre of the world. For this purpose, he used a modern army with so sophisticated tactics and weapons that made La Grande Armée the military machine that would become invincible in those years. The European powers carried out a series of coalitions to stop Napoleon, led by England in order to prevent the spread of revolutionary ideas. The rivalry between France and Britain, which was a constant throughout this stage, responded more to an economic interest than to a conflict of ideas, and they fought for social and colonial control. We must not forget that these events were part of the development of the Industrial Revolution that forced the great powers to open their markets in the process of economic expansion. After suffering his naval defeat at Trafalgar in 1805 and being deprived of the control of the oceans and seas and the possibility of invading Britain, Napoleon was forced to turn their gaze to a continent enemies, with the main objectives of a continental isolation for Britain. Great victories such as Austerlitz, Jena, Aalen, Friedland, and Wagram took place and greatly expanded his empire. But this expansion found a turning point in the campaign of Russia and the Spanish resistance in the War of Independence, which caused serious defeats to French army. Finally, England led to a coalition that beat Napoleon at Leipzig. This defeat forced Napoleon to abdicate and the old regime was reinstated in France. Napoleon was impressed on the island of Elba. He escaped, 1815, to retake power in France. This moment was known as the Rule of the 100 Days. It was necessary to make the Allies react against Napoleon, and England returned to lead a coalition that defeated Napoleon definitely in the legendary Battle of Waterloo on 18th of June 1815. Napoleon was confined to the island of St. Helena in the Pacific Ocean, where he died. Napoleon marked Europe and left a legacy that endures even today in some way. He achieved the disappearance of feudal structures and the emergences of numbers of constitutions of moderate sign in countries dominated by France, the rise of the bourgeoisie as the ruling class, and the implementation of modern law. Besides, he consolidated land reforms carried out during the Revolution. He laid the foundations for the industrialization of France and also secured the principles of a secular education. Man, myth, legend, glory and decadence, Napoleon has become one of the great icons of contemporary history.